Hey guys, Tom here from the Investing with Tom YouTube channel. Welcome back to the channel. If you enjoyed today's video, hit like, hit subscribe, and that way you can see future videos as well. So today we have a very cool video. I got the chance to speak to Nicholas over at the Aussie Money Man YouTube channel. If you don't already know Nicholas, he is an investor, YouTuber, entrepreneur, financial independence retire early advocate, and an absolute money saving machine. He's saved multiple six figures and he's barely 20 years old. So very cool opportunity to talk to Nicholas. There's also going to be a second part of this video over on Nicholas's channel, the Aussie Money Man YouTube channel as well, where the tables are flipped and Nick fires some questions at me. So definitely feel free to check that one out as well. But for now, let's get straight into it and I hope you enjoy. All right, you ready?
Yep.
Cool. Okay. Nicholas, thanks for joining me today. For those who don't know who you are or haven't seen your channel before, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, how you kind of got into the whole money saving and investing kind of world.
Sure thing. Thanks, Tom. So my name is Nicholas. I run the Aussie Money Man channel. I'm 20 years of age at the time of making, or having this chat with you, Tom. And pretty much I jumped into sort of the making money space and all that decently young, just by working jobs, like most people, working at a fruit shop at 13, McDonald's and KFC, all those sorts of jobs. And I got really interested in it in October 2017. So that's when I did my last high school exam. And I was just really bloody interested in essentially making money, obviously financial freedom. I'd come across the FIRE movement. In some sense, at least, I'd sort of thought up the idea of at least sort of being, financially free. So I was sort of following that. And obviously when you're looking to, make money, that leads you to investing, that leads you to business. And ultimately that sort of led me to my YouTube channel, which is essentially focused around just making money, saving money, investing money, but based on a real evidence-based sort of approach. So we're always looking at evidence and studies and data in order to best form our approach. And it's pretty much where I'm at with everything.
Yeah, cool. And you got started way earlier than most people. I sort of started thinking about finances after I left university and was 23, so you're miles ahead of where I was. Do you think there's anything in particular that kind of got you started earlier than most people? Because I guess that is one of the things for me, at least, that jumps out where you're a little bit different from most, I guess.
Yeah, sure thing. If I were to put it down to anything, there'd be perhaps three main things, and number one would probably be just the situation I was in. So, financially, just my upbringing was not fantastic, and in that sense, I sort of had to work, and then because of that, I was like, making money's sort of fun. It's sort of like a video game, and how much money you're making or your net worth. I like to think of it as your level. So I essentially gamified it, which. So part of it was necessity, and then I just sort of gamified it as you do when you're a kid. I think that's still fun in life. The second thing is that I was just always really ambitious and motivated towards something. And when for most people, this lasts until they're 25 even. You don't really know what you want to do in particular. So if you can just make money, it's something to be doing. So it's just that gamifying of it. And I'd probably say those are probably the biggest reasons I started early. I'd say just partly necessity and partly just I was motivated towards something. So probably those two.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. And I guess, so some of the main things that I've seen you talk about on your channel in particular are obviously money saving and investing. I've also seen you get fairly creative with some of the things you're doing with match betting and peer-to-peer lending and all those sorts of things. Do you want to talk us through some of the strategies you've employed to, I guess, get at least a base of capital to start investing at a reasonable scale?
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose that's the sort of saving money side of things. I did think about this one a bit, and I think the biggest thing that I've done that's allowed me to just save so much, and we can talk about the income thing in a second with match betting and all that, is probably just firstly understanding what you actually need to spend money for and what actually makes you happy. And 80% of what makes you happy is going to be your relationships. And we know a very small percent of that other 20% is actually objects and buying things. So from that, you then go, okay, well, I don't really need to buy things unless if it's making me really happy, or, I need that thing, or it's going to save or make me money. So that sort of stuff. And then when you run everything through that test, all of a sudden you're spending nothing. Like I spend really small amounts, and that's really why. And when it comes, I suppose, to making money, well, I mean, that's I think one of the biggest things that you can do, and there's a billion things I can list, is just leveraging your time. So everything you do, you just, for example, when I research investing, and this is how Aussie Money Man started. When I researched investing and how P2P lending works or how stocks work, I just turned that into a YouTube channel and also shared that research. So I was firstly winning and making money from the investing and understanding my investments and investing wisely, but then also by sharing that information and ultimately turning that into sort of what Aussie Money Man is today. So I think it's just doing stuff like that, and I did that, from when I was younger, to just the skills I learned. If I learned coding for whatever reason, I was interested in that, I became a coding tutor. So it's just all leveraging your time, every minute of your time. This is why, you hear all the real wealthy people say, spend your time wisely, spend every minute wisely, and leveraging your time is just one of the ways. But I think it's one of the best ways I've been able to make a fair bit of money, and then also, using that other bit of information around saving money, being able to save so much money. So it's just stuff sort of like that has allowed me to sort of do what I've done.
Yeah, I like it. I've found a couple of very similar things. I have a similar mentality around spending money. The big thing that was a game changer for me was literally downloading an app of a compound interest calculator and sort of looking at the opportunity cost of, okay, if I spend $1,000 today, what am I giving up, what am I taking from my future self from not investing that at 7 or 8% or whatever sort of return? And all of a sudden this, $1,000 iPhone or whatever holiday or anything like that all of a sudden becomes tens of thousands of dollars, and that's quite a strong deterrent for me. So that's it's cool to see we got a similar mindset there.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely,
yeah, for sure. And on the YouTube thing, again, pretty similar. Like I really enjoy my job. I have a job that's completely unrelated to personal finance and investing, but at the same time it is trading your time for money. So the more that we can leverage our time and turn, the things I'm going to be learning and reading behind me anyway into, offering value for other people, if that can become another source of income, that's very cool as well. So that's some cool background to hear. I guess one of the key differences that we have, so we think pretty similarly, I think, in terms of saving money and getting some cash together. One of the areas we differ quite a bit is our actual approach to investing. So do you want to talk us through some of the things you have experimented with, or you found evidence that supports this works really well, and what sort of avenues you've gone down?
Absolutely. No, fantastic question. So when I first started researching and investing, you start like most people, you look at all the main asset classes. You've got like your cash, your stocks, your equities, you sort of your real estate, and you're sort of like, yeah, okay, cool. And all those things can be really intimidating. So the first thing I actually jumped into was P2P lending. And, anyone who looks through my channel will notice my first few videos are mostly just about P2P lending. And so that's what I jumped into first. And the reason for that was just because it was a lot less, especially in Australia at the time. We had, I think, 4 platforms available to retail investors, so investors like, you and me that don't have $20 million yet. And yeah, so I just jumped into that. I just researched that a lot. And while I consider that now as more of a speculative investment, because it isn't proven over time, it's essentially just one investment instrument that I looked at. And for anyone who doesn't know what P2P lending is, all it is you're essentially acting as a bank. You're loaning money out to people through a platform that does credit checks and stuff. So it's quite simple. From there, I then jumped into the stock market. I researched that a lot. Like 2 years now I've spent just trying to understand that. And I ended up essentially settling on investing most of my money in the stock market, at least at the moment. So I've got pretty much all my money I've got invested is in the stock market, and that just invested in every investable stock around the world. 50% hedged, 50% unhedged. That's just pretty much my strategy. So that's small to large cap value and growth. Pretty simple, actually. And I do that based on evidence. So there's a number of studies, and people always ask me for those studies, and I just link them all, and then no one really wants to read them because it is confusing. It's difficult. But yeah, that's what I base that off, and I really like that just because I do like the comfort of it. While I'd probably consider myself more on the risk adverse side, even with my age, etc., being relatively young. So I try to stick with things that I at least feel have fair bit of evidence behind them. But I'm also looking into property more and more because I did make a video recently, and essentially my view on property is that it's good because of leverage. Otherwise, I don't think you're better off putting money into real estate. That's my view. But I do think the leverage available in property is not found elsewhere. So that's pretty much my view. I've got my speculative investments, P2P lending. I've got the stock market using the strategies you said, which I really like. And then obviously property I think can be really good. And if you want to jump into it, take that bit of that risk with the debt, or also known as leverage, I think that's something I'd be looking to jump into as well.
Yeah, cool. And so I have never done peer-to-peer lending, to be honest. I've never even looked into it particularly closely. So I mean, what sort of percentage returns and things are you kind of seeing, and what are the risks that people should be considering with something like peer-to-peer lending?
Really good question. So, firstly, I'd say most people haven't heard of it. Most people haven't invested in it. It's really new, especially in like Australia and New Zealand. There's barely, made platforms that start, bigger in England and China, but not too big here, or I should say the UK. But basically, the returns vary a lot. So if you're investing in sort of what, you're essentially your sort of dud, your dud loans, well, you can get up to 36%. That's the highest I've seen. But investing in the, your top grade people that, have got really good credit scores, they've paid off, all their debts, if that's, credit cards, cars, or other personal loans throughout their life, you're still looking at minimum rates of about 8%. Depending on the length, but generally it's around 8%. So it can be really attractive, and this is what the reason I'm interested in it. Of course, the first thing people say is, well, why would people go to these peer-to-peer lending platforms if they can go to banks?
That's exactly what I was going to ask.
Yeah, that's the first question people ask, and it's a good question. You should be asking these questions, absolutely. And the reason that people do most of the time, of course, you're looking at their credit scores, etc., is because these platforms don't have the overhead that banks have, and therefore they offer much lower interest rates to the people taking the loans, and much higher interest rates to people like you and I that may be investing through these platforms. So that's the reason it's a win-win, and it works quite well, because obviously the platforms will take a small fee. Obviously they're really winning because they're not taking on any risk, besides the risk of running the business, surely. But so that's the main risk. But basically, once you look at your things like your credit scores, obviously you've got the risk of default, but that's, you're looking at things like the credit scores and their history and their background. You've got the risk of the actual platform. I mean, a lot of these platforms, like I said, are very new. They're sort of finding their space. The laws in Australia are changing a lot, so you've got a policy or legal risk. So there's quite a few, and I've made a whole video going through them in depth, but they're your main risks that you're looking at. Is this platform going to still be here? Are the laws going to change? Are these people going to default? And it's just those sorts of things. But look, overall, I think if you do your research and you approach it carefully, it can be fantastic. But it can go absolutely horribly wrong as well if you don't, like any investment. So.
Yeah, for sure. Is there a way that you can sort of, I guess, if I hypothetically was wanting to put $1,000 into peer-to-peer lending, are you literally having to, filter through and pick out one individual loan or one person, or is there a way that you can sort of put that $1,000 almost ETF style into like a basket of people with a certain credit score or anything like that?
Yeah, no, really, really good question. So it depends on the platforms, but most platforms are set up in such a way that either you're automatically doing exactly what you said, ETF style, it's just going to every, loan that's available at the time, and you're putting like cents or dollars in, per person. And a lot of platforms do that, and that's worked out quite well. There are other platforms where, you pick individual people, and you can, pick multiple if you want to. So yeah, pretty much all the platforms give you at least the option. Some it's just sort of part of the way that the platforms sort of works, but yeah, they all have the option for you to just diversify, and of course that's a huge thing that you do when trying to reduce risk. I mean, I often say to people that maybe they should consider, not financial advice of course, and maybe they should consider investing across platforms and across people taking loans as well. So
yeah, okay, yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I'm keen to dig a bit further into the ETFs, because I do hold a couple of ETFs, or one ETF I should say personally, not a couple. But outside of that, our investing philosophies are quite different. And with my personal ETF investment, the approach I've taken is essentially tracking the market. So taking, in my example, a New Zealand top 50 index, it might be an S&P 500 if you're in the States, or All Ordinaries if you're in Australia, or something like that.
Yeah.
I heard you mention there that you've got a few different ETFs in that mix. So talk us through your thoughts with that.
Absolutely. So look, realistically, if I wanted to invest on the US exchange, or one of the US exchanges, I should say, then I could just invest in VT. That actually does what I want to do: invest in small to large cap, growth, value, everywhere, both developed and emerging markets. But because I'm on the ASX, we don't actually have an ETF that does that exactly, meaning that often they'll, for example, not invest in everything but the small cap emerging market stocks. So that's the reason why I've had to sort of divvy it up and break it up. But look, if I wanted to invest on the US exchange, I could realistically just buy VT. So it becomes complicated if you want to do that. But in of itself, it's actually not that difficult. You know, you can buy things like VT, which is the ticker symbol for, you know, just the total world index. So and I'm pretty much doing what you're doing there. I'm just tracking literally the entire market in my case.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. And I'm assuming you're just setting up that, you know, with your situation and age, you're just setting that up with dividend reinvestment, kind of letting it snowball away.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, everything that comes out of it, you know, so your dividends, everything like that, you know, any capital growth, I'm not, you know, selling and spending it. I'm just putting it all back in there and trying to obviously, you know, just put as much money as I can every time I get paid, as long as it's, you know, I've got my emergency fund sitting there. I shouldn't really say get paid, I don't work anymore, but, you know, my business makes me money. I'm getting paid from the business, you know, I'm trying to get out of that mindset, and I just chuck all the money in straight back into it. So yeah, it's really long term, and I'm thinking, you know, I don't know exactly what's going to happen. It's hard to look that far into the future, I think, for most people. I'm thinking, you know, 20, 30 years even, who knows.
Yeah, cool. And in terms of property, so I largely have similar thoughts to you on this as well. So I've made the odd video about property. I've never invested in property in my life. I'm still a renter, and all of my investments really have been stock market related in some way. And yeah, we have similar thoughts. So when I look at particularly New Zealand and Australia seem to have, in my opinion at least, very expensive housing markets compared to a lot of other places in the world. So when I look out at you know, a property in Hamilton where I live, you know, typically you're looking at something like a 5% rental yield, which doesn't sound particularly attractive when you compare that to, say, a long-term stock market return. And you don't have the, you know, ease of diversification and all those sorts of things that you can do in the stock market, which are more difficult in property. But I do agree that one of the great advantages is leverage and being able to use debt at least safely. You can use debt in stock markets, but it's very dangerous because you can get margin calls if your stocks go down and all those sorts of things. So what's your experience with property investing, you know, to date? Is it something that you're already into? Is it something that you're looking to do in future? And what sort of characteristics of a, you know, property investment would you be looking for?
I'll just start with sort of your view there. I'm completely on board with your view. You know, particularly, you know, I mentioned in a recent video the interest rates, for example, are much higher with getting, you know, loans for stocks. But there's also a billion other factors, and it's things like what you said then with margin calls. There's so many more things that just make taking leverage with stocks just basically, I'd almost say entirely unattractive, at least if you're investing as we are long term. So I completely agree with that. Completely agree with the rental yields, etc. So our views seem to be exactly, you know, in line there. Now, in regards to my interest in property, where I'm at with it, I'm actually currently spending about an hour to 3 hours a day researching that. I did that with P2P lending, I did that with the stock market, and now I'm doing that with property. And a big reason for that is, one, I just want to, you know, have this really strong understanding of all of them and know exactly what I'm doing. I find it quite fun. And the other reason is in Australia, I'm not sure if you would have heard, but they recently just put this new grant out there on top of, you know, numerous other grants run by the states and territories here in Australia, that essentially just gives people, you know, up to, I think it's up to $55,000 to build a house. So you know, in response to sort of the pandemic. So that has also, you know, further sort of piqued my interest. Now, all my family have always been property investors, and while I've tried to convert them to the stock market for the reasons that we've discussed, you know, there's liquidity, there's the time costs, there's the actual physical costs that come with property that you don't have in the stock market, etc. That, you know, that they're sort of forcing me into it and saying, well, yeah, but look at this leverage, look at the leverage, and, you know, they are completely right. Leverage is definitely fantastic. So I should mention this isn't my immediate family. This is my extended family. You know, just like a lot of people, they buy property as a home. Then within 30 years, it's worth millions of dollars. It's, you know, they're not so much investing as they are using it as a home, but it turned into an investment. Should probably point that out. But anywho, that's sort of my view on it. So I'm spending a lot of time researching it, and I am interested in potentially, I might not even go through with it. Either way, I'm going to research it, share it on my YouTube channel, share my findings. You know, I do it either way, with or without the YouTube channel, in fact, with or without investing in it. But should I go forward with it, I will be investing in such a way where I'm essentially, you know, trying to diversify as much as I can, and put as little as I can on each house to essentially maximize my leverage. That's essentially my approach to property.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. And are there any types of investments that we haven't covered? We've talked peer-to-peer lending, ETFs, in the stock market, property. Anything else you've delved into?
I did look into gold quite a bit, particularly, you know, as of sort of maybe the last 3-4 months, because of, you know, when this pandemic happened, there's a lot of people, and there's a few Australian YouTube channels that talk about this sort of stuff, and it's all about, and cryptocurrency as well, where they, you know, get into gold, get into cryptocurrency, you know, 50-50 of those, and, you know, the stock market's going to crash. The realist, you know, Australia is, you know, particularly, you know, they talk about Australia, but, you know, I think it's, you know, they're speaking more widespread. You know, the Australian property market is a huge bubble. It's all a, you know, government scheme, stuff like that, and you jump into gold or cryptocurrency. So I did look into both of these things quite a lot. And from what I can find, and I don't know if you research this a lot, and I'd be interested to hear your views, gold essentially is not a great idea for most people, pretty much everyone, not financial advice. And then cryptocurrency as well is something that may be a good idea to put a tiny bit of money in, but really you shouldn't be putting, you know, much at all or in relative to your overall portfolio. So there are two other things that I did do a fair bit of research into. Gold, I actually looked at some academic studies on it as well, and, you know, it doesn't seem to be much of an investment at all. And even not too much of a store of value. A lot of people think of it as, you know, this safe haven. Doesn't seem to be that either. So
yeah, I have pretty similar views, to be honest. It's a tricky one because you can look at almost any asset class, especially cryptocurrency recently and gold recently, and say, you know, this particular asset class has outperformed over the last 1 year or 5 years or 10 years. But when you look back over a longer data set, often a lot of those things tend to fall apart.
Exactly.
And the thing for me, I guess the way I think about the whole investing world really is trying to put a value on assets and trying to figure out, you know, if I lay out X amount of dollars today, how many dollars am I likely to get back in the future? That's just the way I think about, you know, buying individual stocks. And you don't have that with gold or cryptocurrency because they're non-productive assets. So, you know, you don't get a 2% dividend yield off your gold bar sitting under your house or whatever, you know. So it's very difficult for me, at least, to put a value on those things. You know, that gold does have a real world use with jewelry and that sort of stuff, but it's just too hard basket stuff for me, essentially. I'm assuming you have pretty similar thoughts there.
Absolutely, yeah, and you know, I think you hit the nail on the head with both points there. But you know, particularly the first point, you know, all those papers, they look at exactly what you just mentioned. When you look out over the long term, it's just like, well, all of your points pretty much have just crumbled, you know. So yeah, completely the same view again there. Yeah, cool. So I guess we, to change tack a little bit, we all sort of get into this investing and money game for different reasons. We've already touched on it a little bit at the start with your background, and for me it was, you know, trying to get away from a model where I'm trading my time for money and trying to, you know, essentially have more freedom. As much as I enjoy what I'm doing, I want to have the choice to do other things if I choose so. So, you know, what's the end game look like for you? What have you got any sort of short, medium, long-term goals that you're really pushing towards at the moment? Yeah, you know, I think it's, you know, very, very similar to what you said. It's just a matter of, you know, there's a lot of awesome and amazing things you can do in this world. But in order to do that, you need time, and there's not a lot of time, but a lot of things that you can do and are going to want to do. So therefore, yeah, ideally you need to stop trading your money for time. So pretty much it's just that. It pretty much is just a matter of, you know, slowly, you know, sort of kicking away at, you know, sort of that your need or requirement to essentially work really on anything that you don't want to be working on, and just free up time. So that's essentially what it is for me, just freeing up more and more time until you're essentially in retirement, where you're no longer trading today for tomorrow. That's pretty much my goal. And in regards to sort of short-term goals, not particularly. I find it incredibly difficult because while I keep making these short-term goals and medium-term goals, etc., by the time I'm getting to them, something huge changed, and often for the positive. You know, often I just come across, you know, my business grows way faster than I could possibly anticipate it, or I get some payout from some business partner they didn't expect, and that just keeps happening. So for me, you know, a good example is initially I said, okay, I'm going to retire at 40, and then it was 30. And then I'm looking at it again now and thinking, well, you know, it's just that sort of stuff. And it's incredibly hard to set those sorts of goals. So I think really I've got my ultimate goal, and I'm just sort of working my way sort of generally there. I just think it's so hard to plan out these sorts of things because you just don't know what's going to happen. And fortunately for me, it's just been really in the positive. All these great things happening that are just throwing me forward and forward. So really, again, that ultimate goal of just freeing up more and more time is pretty much where I'm at, and just doing more things that you enjoy. Obviously, like I mentioned before, there's fair reason to believe that 80% of happiness comes from time with other people. Often you're not being paid to hang out with your family, friends, partner, whatever it is. So therefore, just having more time for that sort of stuff, really.
Yeah, cool. And I guess if we fast forward a few years and you've got millions of dollars invested, throwing off hundreds of thousands of dollars to you a year without you doing anything, how do you see yourself spending your days? Do you think you'll still be working, still keeping yourself busy? What are your thoughts there?
No, that's a fun question. Yeah, it's a good thing to be able to answer and think about, I suppose. And that's the sort of stuff, if you read self-help books and stuff, they'll tell you to be thinking about, put your mindset in that place. Yeah. So, and I think that's brilliant. I'm really into that sort of stuff, actually. But look, really for me, it's the sort of stuff that I'm already doing a small amount of now that I want to be, doing more. So all the sort of stuff that you do when you have free time is the sort of stuff that you, I guess, would imagine that you're doing all the time. So for me, that's, that's working out. I'd still definitely be doing what I do on Aussie Money Man. I love researching stuff. I'm always researching, if it's psychology or if it's finance, it's generally those things, and I'll be sharing that. I love to sort of do musical things, so if that's playing the keyboard or piano, just those sorts of things, and just really, again, just spending time with people that you want to be spending time with. I think the main things I'd be doing.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I think let's cut it there, Nicholas. For those that are watching, we are going to have a second part of this chat. We're going to turn the tables a little bit, and Nick's going to ask me some questions over on the Aussie Money Man YouTube channel. So head over and check that one out. Thanks for checking out that conversation, everyone, with myself and Nicholas from the Aussie Money Man YouTube channel. Just a reminder, there is a part 2 of this video where the tables are turned, and Nicholas is interviewing me with some questions about value investing and saving money and all that sort of thing. So if you're interested in checking that out, I will leave a link down in the description, and it'll be the pinned comment below. So definitely go check that out, and also head over to Nicholas's channel, Aussie Money Man, and hit subscribe so that you can support his channel as well. So hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, I hope you have a great day, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.